In a democracy, citizens need to be informed. Informed about policies, issues, homelessness, law enforcement, and social services. In order for people to make good decisions that affect their lives, they need to be informed. Conversations with Erroll Parker.
Welcome to our program. We are visiting with Dr. Alex Norman, who is a professor emeritus from the University of California at Los Angeles, and he is a longtime Long Beach resident. He wrote a book called African American Leadership at the Crossroads, and this is part 2 of the series, and we've been discussing a lot of interesting things historically, Dr. Norman, about Du Bois and George Washington Carver and Booker T. Washington, and how that has catapulted into some modern type of things with this post-traumatic, now I'm misquoting it.
Slave syndrome.
Slave syndrome. Now, the African American Convening Committee, through a grant by the California Endowment, tried to build an organization that would be a hub organization, similar to what the Black Congress did back in the day in the 60s.
Yes.
But that failed. And we talked in the first series about it failed and why it failed, but there's a new movement that Councilman Al Austin is championing in terms of establishing an African American Cultural Center, which I'll co-chair here, me and Max Viltz. And you say there is a chance that organization, if handled properly and learning from the mistakes that was made from the first AACC, it has a chance to be that organization that will bring the African American community together. How important is the success of this fledgling organization to this community?
It's extremely important because the forces that have operated against us for 500 years are still operating. I mean, the fact that we have in the White House a president who says, I am a nationalist, and supports people who are going through Charlottesville saying the Jews will not replace us, and who, after a woman's life is taken by one of those white nationalists, says they're good on both sides. When you have that kind of force operating in the country, and that presents the environment in which we are going to be viewed, we need to organize. And the African American Cultural Center is an opportunity for us to correct a mistake of the past.
But you warn us in this book that and some of the same cast and characters are involved in this, or at least there was at one time, if those same infighting takes place, then it's very possible that this movement with the African American Cultural Center would not be successful.
I'll say it even stronger. If there is not support from all of our leadership, not just those in positions of identified leadership roles, if there is not support for this effort from all of our leadership, then it's like I say in the book, that we're kind of sitting on top of a volcano, not knowing that what's about to erupt, because the white nationalists, the Aryan Brothers, the White Citizens Councils, all those groups, they've organized. And they have a medium through Fox in which to spew their ideology. And they have the acceptance of the president and the White House for their behavior. And if we do nothing, then, this Hitler took over democracy. Germany was a democracy when Hitler came to power.
That's right.
And so this democracy could easily follow the same path that Germany followed, because Trump's first wife said that he had a book by Hitler, Mein Kampf, on his nightstand every night that he went to sleep. So he got those ideas from somewhere.
Now you mentioned all segments of what community? The African American community.
The African American community, the allies of the African American community, the supporters of the African American community, the different ethnic groups, because it's just a matter of time before white supremacy starts with one group, but then it moves quickly to the next group. And right now, the focus is really on immigration and brown people. But for 241 years, it was on black people. So it doesn't take long for those in power to use that power to stay in power.
Dr. Norman, we have 3 African American city councilmen. We have an African American on the school board. We have an African American on the Long Beach Community College board. We have 5 elected officials. We have an NAACP in this town. We have a 100 Black Men organization in this town. We have some very talented African Americans who live in this town.
Yes.
What is it going to take? But let's talk about the 3 African American first. Let's just talk about the 3 African American city council people. This issue of the African American Cultural Center could be, when it's championed by one, what will it take for the other 2 to really get on board for this very important project?
I think that's a conversation that would be nice to have with the 3 councilmen. Maybe you could have the 3 councilmen come on
the show.
This program, on this show, to talk about how they could get together around that
dialogue.
That dialogue, because it's important to everyone. You see, I think that what's happening here is a repeat of Du Bois, Washington, and Garvey. Each person, and I've met separately with each of them just around this book and around the input that they have in this book.
What was their response?
Well, their response is that they are very much interested in the same things, but their interests don't converge. And so each is doing what he thinks is very important, and it is very important. But there must be something around which we must collaborate, because the only time that we have advanced as a group is when we have collaborated. We got the 1964 Civil Rights Act.
Yes.
We got the 1965 Voting Rights Act.
Right.
I mean, God, and look at what's happening now with voters being purged from the voting rolls. So that we really do need to get together, because the one way to control this African population is to not have it have a voice vote.
We talked about the late 60s, early 70s when Walt Bremont tried to do that, and you were with the Black Congress and you were a part of that. Let's talk a little bit about mediation. You got opposing forces, you got different diverse forces out there, and you've done some of this, because I've been a part of some of that, you facilitated some of that. Let's do mediation one-on-one with African Americans in leadership in any town. You say there needs to be an organization that does that. Let's say there's an individual who's very skilled at doing that and are not a part of an organization. Will that work?
I don't think so.
Why not?
I tried it. I talked individually with each one of the Councilman Austin. You know, I thanked each one of them, because to run for public office and to stand for public office in this environment, I know what happens down there at City Hall. So I know what they're coming up against. So I wanted them to know that I appreciated the fact that they took their leadership position seriously enough that they would run for public office in this community, given this environment. And so I thanked them for that. I also said to them, you know, the Black community needs to see some expression from the 3 of you that there is something around which you can come together as one, because that would be unifying for us. I was not able to do that.
Why do you think you weren't able to do that? Because you weren't a part of an organization, or what?
I think that an institution or an organization sends a stronger message.
Okay.
Yeah. I think an individual can be perceived as doing it for personal or professional reasons.
Okay.
But an organization that has a mission can be mission driven to do that. And I think it would have, because I think the desire is there, but there are issues that need to be dealt with before they can come together.
For instance,
you see, Du Bois secretly admired Washington because Washington had the ear of the president. Du Bois didn't have the ear of the president. So he admired that, but he was not able, for personal reasons, to get beyond that. Now, I don't know what the issue is among our leadership, but I do know that there seems not to be a common core around which they can operate. And yet, each of them, I appreciate each one of them individually and for different things, but I was simply not able to get them to come together.
Let's touch on another subject, not another subject. Malcolm X and Martin Luther King were in the early 60s, they were at odds in terms of their strategies in order to have black liberation. That wasn't properly mediated. However, near the end of both of their lives, they came to some realities, but they were both assassinated later on.
Yes.
Is that example apropos to what we're going through right now in the city of Long Beach in terms of different strategies? Or is it different now than I mean, you're saying get along, what's the term? Go along to get along. That group. And then there's Black Lives Matter. That's supposed to be, and there's a branch of Black Lives Matter in Long Beach.
Yes.
They're supposed to be more proactive. But then there's a generational gap there. Most of the people go along to get along are probably elders. And they've retired and they're comfortable.
Yes.
And then there's a generation who is up and coming. And then we get back to mediation. I guess the question is rhetorical. You're saying that an organization and not an individual can do that. And how likely is that to happen in the city of Long Beach, in the black community?
That's a $64 million question because I'm not sure that I can't read the tea leaves on that one. But I remember I was in D.C. Whitney Young was one of my mentors. At the time, he was the mentor at the time. And he would take me to meetings if I was in town. And he took me to a meeting where he and Baird Ruster and all those heavyweights were there. So I was. Let
me interrupt right quick. We're going to go to a break.
Okay.
And I want you to have time to develop this story. Okay. We'll be right back with Dr. Alex Norman, and he's going to talk about his mentor, Whitney Young, and we're going to kind of bring it home to the city of Long Beach and how we can, as an African American community, can get together and make some progress. We'll be right back after these messages.
In a democracy, citizens need to be informed about policies, issues, homelessness, law enforcement, and social services. In order for people to make good decisions that affect their lives, they need to be informed. Conversations with Erroll Parker.
Welcome back to Conversations with Erroll Parker, a two-part series. We're talking to Dr. Alex Norman about a lot of things nationally in terms of the African American community and the city of Long Beach and the African American community. And we were just talking, Alex Norman, about Whitney Young being your mentor. Tell us about that. And you're trying to pull that into what we're doing here in Long Beach.
Yeah, well, the point that I wanted to make was that I was at this meeting, and Dorothy Height, who was the head of the National Council of Negro Women, she was the only woman in that civil rights movement around that table. And they were arguing over some strategy. And she said, if you always do what you've always done, you'll always get what you always got. And I think that's true for us. If we always do what we've done in the past, we're going to get the same results.
That's right. Yeah.
So if our leadership continues to go off in their separate paths, then we can predict what's going to happen. So Malcolm changed his mind after he went to Mecca.
That's right.
He went to Mecca and he saw Muslims of all colors, of all shapes, of all sizes. He came back and he said, oh my God, I've been wrong all this time.
And he was willing to admit that.
That's a big thing.
Yes.
I've been wrong all this time and I got to rethink this thing. And his rethinking led him to believe that it was a class struggle.
Yes.
So that people at the class level had to get together. The poor blacks, whites, browns, Asians, reds, yellows, all have to come together because this thing is about oppressing the lower classes. Given something like that happening, I don't see a change.
Mm-hmm. So it's got to be something different, a different strategy used,
Yes.
a different analysis used, and I say an intergenerational coming together as well. And looking at churches,
Yes.
a lot of churches don't have a lot of young people.
Yeah.
Worshiping is old style for a lot of people. So mediation is very important. But let me read something also. You're using a Zulu saying, "I am because you are." What does that mean? It's an old African Zulu phrase, but what does it mean saying, I am because you are? What does that have to do with what we're talking about here?
Because we are, we can't exist separately. We have to do it together. There's another African phrase, if you want to go quickly, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. And it's that we have to see that I am you and you are me. Us. Runga had this. Anywhere we are, us is.
Mm-hmm.
And that's it. And we have to really get to that. Now, that's transforming the mind up here.
Yeah.
To really think, to get outside of the individual box and to realize that everything that black people have, we got as a group. None of us got it as individuals. We all got it as a group. And we got it when we came together, when we banded together. Mutual aid, self-help.
Mm-hmm. It seems to me, and you have a think tank, Rethink Greater Long Beach. It seems to me that might be the central issue in the African American community nationally as well as locally is education. And you guys did a study with the Long Beach Unified School District, about the Long Beach Unified School District and the achievement gap that the African American, particularly males, are. Can you elaborate on the reason why you did the study and what was the results of it?
Well, we're no longer together. Rethink is no longer together. We're now kind of disbanded.
Okay.
Although we're still around and we still get together occasionally. But one of the things that we noticed was that there was 27 to 30% academic performance gap between white students and black students. And we also noticed that English language learners outperformed black, whose primary language is English. And yet English language learners had to learn the language and then perform.
That's fascinating.
So we muse something must be wrong in that system. That there has to be something wrong in that system for that gap to persist. So as you look at that gap, whenever there's an increase in the academic performance of the students, it does this. The black students increase their performance, but so do the white students. So the gap remains the same. And from the 3rd grade through the 11th grade, that 30% gap is there. It narrows to 27% in the 12th grade. But that doesn't matter. 3 percentage points doesn't matter at that point. Now, there are several reasons that one may think about that. I happen to think that the kind of education that we have now is more suited for an industrial revolution and a manufacturing
Why do you
economy.
say that?
Because the education teaches you repetition, punctuality, and obedience. And that's what you needed in the factory. You needed people to do repetitive work. They needed to get there on time, and they needed to obey orders. And so that was what we had for years, and that worked for years. But our economy has changed. Our manufacturing has gone offshore. We're basically a service industry country. We have information and communication technology. And if you're not hooked to a computer right now, you're out of the society. And yet we have communities that are not hooked to the net. So in a sense, we get what I call a stillborn education. I mean, you can make all the A's and you want. If you're not being educated for what's currently going on in society, if you're being educated for 20 years ago, then when you graduate from school, your skills you have are not going to be compatible with the skill set that's necessary.
So you're saying that's by design?
I'm not saying it's by design. I'm saying, but it is.
Well,
now, I don't know whether, I'm just saying, I don't know that. See, I don't think they're that smart. See, I think you give people too much credit for being that smart.
Okay.
They might have fallen into this.
Okay.
But I don't think they're that smart.
Okay.
I think they see an opportunity and they say, oh, well, here's an opportunity to exclude someone. Mm-hmm. So they exclude. But I don't think that, although there are people like the Koch brothers, I think the Koch brothers, they are thinking way ahead, and so when they developed all of these conservative think tanks, they're thinking ahead of preserving white people because they see a lot of brown and black people coming into this country.
But the results of what you described means that there's going to be a permanent underclass.
Yes.
And if that's not by design, then that is like, okay, this is the way we've already done it. Mm-hmm. And it has worked for us, and we're going to continue to do it. Now, you may be right in terms of people saying, well, they're not that smart. He said, listen, I got my degree. I'm in policy making. I'm going to do what my predecessor has done.
Yeah.
But in the result of that is a permanent underclass. Now, when we look at we said the economy is great. But when we look at every major city of this country, we see thousands of homeless people. Mm-hmm. How can we say this economy is doing well?
Well, the economy is doing well for 10% of the population.
Okay.
And the reason we say that is because you look at the stock market. But 90% of the population don't own stock.
Okay.
So 10% of the population is doing very well. Mm-hmm. But that's what we have to say. So when we say the economy is doing well, that's propaganda. Because propaganda is constantly saying what is not to make you believe what is. Mm-hmm. And we say, oh, the economy is doing well. It's great. You're going to get rich. Well, you're going to get rich if you already have some wealth. Mm-hmm. If you don't have any wealth, as Ray Charles said, how are you going to get something if you don't have anything? So how you get the first is a mystery to him, right? Mm-hmm. So how do you get the first? Mm-hmm. You need a stake, so to speak.
Okay.
Well, white people have had a stake for hundreds of years. Their families have been able to pass on wealth down to them. We've had that for 2 generations. Mm-hmm. So it's not possible for us to catch up. So we have to look at parallel industries. We have to look at what do we do to build our own institutions so that when the major institutions in this country falter, our institution will soften the blow on us. As it stands now, there's nothing in between. So that when the major institutions fail, falls hardest on us.
So, in essence, I think what you're saying is that we need some forward creative thinking that you probably won't get in the public education.
Definitely will not get it in public education. Because the teachers have to be retrained.
That's right.
There's a tremendous a burden that's placed on our teachers because they become disciplinarians. I mean, and they're even outsourcing that. They're outsourcing the disciplinarian responsibility to police officers. So you got police officers walking up and down the hall slamming our kids on the floor, you know? I mean, they're not there to teach the kids, they're there to enforce the law. So our schools have become something quite different. So in the same sense that when whites would not let us in their schools, we have to develop our own educational institutions. And we have to educate our kids for the future, not for the past.
Then, back when I was going to school, Dr. Norman, there was SHOP, there was vocational education. And I've been in Long Beach for 50 years, and I've seen that dissipate for a long time.
Yes.
Should the new movement be entrepreneurship?
I think it has to be a variety of things. Because I remember, 30 years ago when I was one of these young futurists, you know, who was looking at trends. And the talk was, 50% of the jobs haven't been created yet. So I think what we have to do is educate our future workers to the fact that change is a good thing. See, during your and my lifetime, you worked for one organization for as long as you could and you retired from it.
Exactly.
Now they're hopping from job to job to job to job, and we're looking and saying, God, in my day, that would have been called instability. You know, boy, look at how unstable he is. He's going from job to job to job. Why didn't he settle down? The new economy calls for that. It calls for you to learn how to learn and relearn and learn how to unlearn what you've learned so that you can learn something else. That's what we need to be teaching. It's not just critical thinking. It's we've got to unlearn a lot of things that we have taken for granted in order to learn the things that are relevant.
What I'm hearing, Dr. Norman, is that as far as education is concerned, there needs to be an advocate.
Yes.
An advocate organization, advocate elected officials. And now we're looking at this upcoming election on the school board. Felton Williams is going to be leaving, and there's 3 candidates that's running for office. It's John Matthews, and then there's Eric Miller, and then there's Tonya Reyes-Arunga. Let's say Tonya wins. There would be no black representation on the Long Beach Unified School District. That's dangerous.
Yes.
Even though Tonya is a friend
Yes.
of the black community, we would not be shut out if she won.
Yes.
However, she cannot represent black education as
Yes.
well as a black person.
Yes.
We look at DeAndrews in the 6th district.
Right.
And there's a Cambodians are running against him and
Right.
an African American. If he loses now, and then Austin is in a tough race.
Right.
Rex seems to be okay. His election is coming up later on. These are critical times.
Yes.
From a national level, before I get you out of here, from a national level to a local level. But before we get there, I got to ask you these questions in terms of not dealing with Long Beach. Is our democracy in trouble?
Yes.
Why would you say that?
Well, it's in trouble because we're not educated. We took civics out of the classroom more than 30 years ago. So that we never educated people, because when we had civics in the classroom and people understood the Constitution, you got Vietnam War protests. Yeah. You got people saying, hey, you know, it's my constitutional right. You know, this is a First Amendment right. So we took all of that stuff out of the school, out of the educational system. So we deliberately miseducated our young to not think about the Constitution, about what a democracy means to them and to us. Black people are the one who demanded that this country lives up to its values. Before that, nobody was challenging the Constitution. We're the ones who constantly challenged the Constitution, so that as we rose, all of the other boats, you know,
Like the old Chinese proverb.
yeah,
Right?
all the other boats were
Rose.
lifted also.
That's right.
And the 60s and the 70s not only raised the awareness about black ethnicity, Italians, Latinos, Asians, everybody's awareness raised to a point of, hey, yeah, you know, we are different, but we are Americans. So, in a sense, yes, there is a permanent underclass. Yes, democracy is under assault. Yes, it's because we are not educated to what a democracy is, and nobody's going to teach us. So we have to have our own institutions, because what you just said was, God, if Felton is not there, as if Felton is going to be the caretaker of us, why does Felton have to be a caretaker in the Long Beach Unified School District? If, in fact, the Long Beach School District's mission is to educate all the kids. Why do we need an advocate? Mm-hmm. We need an advocate because if I am there, you are there. If I am not there, you are not there. Hmm? So I do think we have to get back to what got us here, and that is we really have to invest in the historically black universities and colleges.
Again.
And so that's where whatever little estate that I have when I make my transition is going to go back there,
Yes.
It's not going to go to SC or UCLA or, it's going to go to Morris Brown and to Atlanta University and Clark University, because they're going to need it if they're going to educate the future generation.
Last thing, I'd like you to look in the camera and talk to the African American community in regards to the African American Cultural Center, which you think is very, very important. What words of wisdom from an elder who is very respected would have to say to those who are who need to get on board, and for those who are already on board? What would you have to say to them, having written this book?
I don't know that I have anything to say to them, but I have a question that I would ask of them. With the resources that I have, with the experience that I have, and the wisdom that I've gained, how can I help you?
Good. Very, very good. And spoken from a person that I have a tremendous amount of respect since I've known you. We're going to need your help and all the help of the grassroots, the intelligentsia, to pull this off, knowing that there will be some opposition. Dr. Norman, thank you so much. It was worth the wait trying to get you.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
I thought it was a very, very good conversation in a two-part series. Thank you so much. That was Dr. Alex Norman imparting some wisdom. He wrote a book, and this book is fascinating. I've had a couple of people read the book, and they've analyzed it for me, which prepared the questions for me. But he's taken out time to share this book with us, and it's a provocative book. I encourage you to get the book. You can pick it up at Village Treasures on Long Beach Boulevard and Broadway.
247 East Broadway.
Max Veltzer Village Treasures. There's books there. And the name of the book is African American Leadership at the Crossroads, and A Journey into the Struggle for Equal Rights by Dr. Alex Norman. Thank you again for being in the program.
Thank you for having me.
And thank you for joining on Conversation with Erroll Parker, and we'll be back next week with some exciting guests. Please join us. Good night.
In a democracy, citizens need to be informed about policies, issues, homelessness, law enforcement, and social services. In order for people to make good decisions that affect their lives, they need to be informed. Conversations with Erroll Parker.